Century, the assassination of a president. By pure chance, a spectator with a home movie camera managed to record the event on film, the only such film in existence. Now, 35 years later, a battle is under. This invaluable historical record is worth. Gary Gingberg has our report.
It is the most important 26 seconds of movie film ever taken. Abraham Zapruder, President Kennedy in 1963. Carefully preserved over the years, the Zapruder film is always at the center of every assassination debate. Now it's at the center of a fight over money. Abraham Zapruder owns and controls the film. The government, which has new legal authority to take over assassination records, wants the film and has offered $3 million. The $18.5 million. Zapruder, a dressmaker, just happened to have the best vantage point in Dealey Plaza. Photographed the horrifying scene, then headed to a TV station to ask if they would develop his film.
Then I had another shot or two. I couldn't say what it was, one or two. And I saw his head practically open up, all blood and everything. And I kept on shooting.
Richard Stolley, then with Life magazine, reached Zapruder before day. He and several Secret Service agents watched in Zapruder's office.
The atmosphere in the room at that moment has embedded itself in my memory. Appalling, most unforgettable moment in my journalistic career. That when you see the president die before your eyes, the Secret Service agents, all of us went.
A horde of reporters shoved its way into Zapruder's office. The gentlemanly Stolley was allowed to bid first.
So I said, 50,000, that's as far as I can go. He listened to the racket in the hall, and he looked at me and said, let's do it.
Life eventually gave the film rights back to the Zapruders. The family, as negotiations with the government move toward a deadline next month, is now joining with a production company. Waleed Ali is the executive producer.
It's shocking, it's vulgar, it's even disgusting, but it's something that I think the American people should see.
Son Henry declined to be interviewed. For his part, Stolley remembers how Abraham Zapruder was tormented by a nightmare. In it, he was walking past a seedy movie house.
And he said there was a man outside saying, film of the president being murdered. Come in and see the president being murdered on the big screen.
Stolley is convinced the idea of a JFK assassination is Abraham Zapruder's worst nightmare come true. In New York, I'm Eric Engberg for Eye on America.
Here's to the weekend warrior in all of us, pushing our bodies beyond the norm. Mercifully, there's an advanced medicine called Advil. And it will. Advil works fast, right at the site of muscle pain, stopping it where it starts.
Was a 22-year-old soldier on leave at that point. He had taken his mother's camera to Dealey Plaza, photographing film at that point. After the assassination, his film was confiscated. Also notice on the small concrete retainer here, on top of that is Abraham Zapruder and his secretary, Mary Setzman. At this point, Zapruder is taking his famous Zapruder film. This photograph. Philip Willis said that when he heard the first shot hit the president, he took this photograph. So I believe at this point the president has just been struck in the back. I believe the location of the shot, as I said earlier, came from the Dow Tech building. And what happened was the bullet and the president president's back, about the T3 area, about 1.5 inches over to the right. Now what's interesting about this, although you can't quite see what I'm wanting, is that there's a cushion that I will show you has a bullet hole in the front. I will show that the shot that hit Kennedy at this point first slowed the bullet down. I believe this is why the bullet did not transit from President Kennedy. Also, I want to direct your attention to the people under the Stemmons. I believe there to be two conspirators in this film. The one man, I believe, is the Umbrella Man, and the reason I believe he is involved in the crime was he would raise his umbrella and turn it clockwise. He would pump the umbrella, and you can see this in various films. The other one is a person later dubbed as the Cuban. This is the Cuban here. As the president approaches into the killing zone, the Cuban raises his hand and keeps it raised. I believe that it was his job to make sure that the president was taken out, and he had a good view of looking into the limousine, and unfortunately his hand was raised throughout most of the killing sequence, or the shot sequence, of the president. So let's move on. This is the James Algen photograph 255. What I want to show to you is the location of where I believe the sniper was who fired the Z189 shot. From ear-witness testimony, several people believed that the shot came from this location. I believe this to be the case. Also, I would like to bring up these women, young women here, looking out the window. I will go into more detail later on about this. At any rate, as I said earlier, the first shot occurred at Z189 and transited through the presidential cushion. This is the rear seat of the presidential limousine. This bloody photograph was taken the night of the assassination in the White House garage. What I want to bring your attention to is what I believe to be where a bullet hole occurred. At this point right here, I believe that is a bullet hole. The bullet hole that transited through the rear cushion, striking the president in the back. I had talked to Bill Hess. Bill Hess was the builder, or had built the car and rebuilt the car. He was from Hess and Eisenhart in Cincinnati. In 1992, I had a long conversation with Bill Hess. He had mentioned several things to me. What was interesting was the day before in San Antonio, the presidential limousine was used in San Antonio and also in Dallas. On the day prior, the cushion the cushion was not the same as the one used the day of the assassination. The way I could prove this is because there was a cording trim in the area of where the bullet hole was. This can readily be seen in the film if you examine it closely. So someone, the night of the assassination, when the limousine was flown to Love Field, had replaced the seat. I find this very interesting. This seat became Commission Exhibit 353, which I explained, and it was never placed back into the car. When the limousine was flown to Cincinnati, driven to Cincinnati, Ohio, the cushion in the rear of the car, which I talked to Bill Hess, had the cording on that. So that was a different seat. So this seat had been gotten rid of. I had ran down the seat a little bit farther to find out what happened to it. Currently, there is a person from Baltimore, Maryland, named Robert White, who has sections of this cushion. He does not have this section of the bullet hole. I believe this is very incriminating evidence, and I believe that, you know, the bullet transiting through the cushion slowed down the shot enough so the bullet that struck the president in the back did not transit from the president. This is frame Z189 taken of the Zapruder film. Notice Philip Willis at this point here, just taking the photograph that we've seen previously. What I want to bring your attention to is President Kennedy. Notice that President Kennedy at this point is waving to the crowd. He has just been struck at this point. In the next several frames, which we will see later in the Zapruder film when I show it, but for right now, notice the position of President Kennedy. At this time, he is waving to the crowd. He is looking over towards the grassy knoll. Also, notice Governor Connolly's position. Although it is not as clear as Kennedy, what you can see is Connolly is also looking over at the knoll at this point. Again, the president, I believe, has just been shot at this point. Let's go on to the second shot. I believe this photograph represents where the presidential limousine was on Elm Street, or the approximate position when President Kennedy received the shot at frame Z206. I believe this shot came from underneath the Triple Underpass, transited through the presidential windshield just to the left of William Robert Greer, the driver, and entered Kennedy's throat. What we're seeing in this slide is, I believe, is the location of where the sniper fired the Z206 shot. I'm saying the shot came from this area. What this is, these are pillars on the inside on Commerce Street, and behind them is a walkway that you can go across the bridge or under the bridge to the other side. I believe this is an excellent location, and after checking out the different angles and ballistics of the shots, I believe it is quite feasible that the shot was fired from this location. If one would look out of the sniper's lair between the pillars, this would be the view. Interestingly, at this point here, James Tague was hit by a fragment from one of the shots. He was standing at that location during the assassination. I believe this is the view that, if you look directly out from behind the pillar, this is what you believe. The weapon used under the Triple Underpass was a special 74 Winchester. This was modified and had a silencer. What I found most interesting about this location was directly to the sniper's right was an electrical box at the very corner on Commerce Street. That is what you're seeing in this photograph. It could have been very easy for a sniper using a weapon after firing it to store it in this box and then just walk away and go back into Dealey Plaza or go the other way and just escape at this point. What I had said was, I believed that the shot that struck the president in the throat was fired at frame 206. What I would rather explain this a little bit more. The reason for saying this can be found in these pan frames. From the Zapruder film had a wet splice at frame Z208 and 212. If you can obtain the four missing frames, you will notice in frame 209 that the film is blurred. What I am saying at this point is because of the blurring of the film, I believe the shot, I used the term 206, but it may have been 208 to be exact, but somewhere in between frame 207 and 212 the first shot occurred. Now the problem is on this, at frame 200 the presidential limousine, where the bullet hole appears in the front windshield of the limousine, cannot be seen after frame 200. So you have to wait till the limousine passes from behind the Stemmons Road sign. Incidentally, these films are reverse films of the Zapruder film. At any rate, the earliest the bullet hole can be seen is at frame Z 218. The bullet hole can be seen at that point and can be continuously seen at random frames throughout the film, but because of the angle of the windshield to Zapruder's camera, you can see the bullet hole in some frames, in other frames you can't. In frame 222 the bullet hole is quite clear, and again in frame 218 the bullet hole is clear as the limousine passes from behind the Stemmons. What we are looking at is frame 227. What is interesting at this point, if you remember, in frame 189 President Kennedy was looking towards the grassy knoll. At this time Kennedy has been struck once in the back at 189, which caused his right arm to lower to his chin, as we are seeing here, and what we're seeing here is, notice the bullet hole. Though this is 227, the bullet hole can be seen in this frame, and it has gone through the windshield and struck the president in the throat. Notice Kennedy's left hand raising towards his throat at this time. What he is trying to do is cough. He has to cough first before he can breathe, and this is what you're seeing. So in other words, he is turning to the front and trying to cough at this point. Now let's move on to Governor Conley. At this point Governor Conley has been hit at frame 224. This was proven by his coat lapel flapping between 224 and 225. Although it is not, I do not have the quality film to see this, it did happen. At any rate, what we want to draw our attention to at this point is what Governor Conley is holding his Stetson hat with his right and left hand at this time, and then when he was struck at frame 224, the bullet had, in other words, the bullet had entered his back. It was fired from the 6th floor of the school book depository, entered his back at a 26-degree downward angle and a 12-degree side-to-side angle. The bullet did not hit his wrist, and you can see this, or in the next frame more clear, that he is still holding his Stetson hat. He has been hit, and at this point his right hand is flipping up in the air while he is holding his hat. Another indication of shots being fired at this time is if we look at this person here in the background. I call this person, this black man, the apron man, because he's wearing an apron, and what he is doing at this point, he is clapping. So at this point, this is frame 227, and at 224 what he does is, when there have been 3 shots fired, but at this point he stops clapping and swings his hands downward in a clockwise motion. You'll see this later on in the Zapruder film. So at this point, what we are seeing is Kennedy was struck once in the back, once in the throat. Conley's hit in the back. It transits through his chest. And by the way, I talked to Bill Hess, and Bill Hess said that there was a bullet found in the floorboard directly in front of the jump seat in which Governor Conley was hit. Now notice also that the Secret Service agent riding shotgun in the front seat, is looking in the rearview mirror. Now, it was his job to protect the president. And throughout this time period, from 133 all the way up to 227, Roy Kellerman is the agent's name. He is looking in the rearview mirror. It's his job to protect the president, and yet he is doing nothing. And it is quite clear that he has observed both the governor and the president being shot at this point. This is frame 230 of the Zapruder film. Notice there is more clarity in this photograph. Notice the bullet hole here, as it's quite obvious, has penetrated the windshield. Notice again Kennedy reacting to the back and throat shot. He's feeling the full effects of them at this point. He's trying to cough. Also notice clearly that this is Governor Connolly's right hand, and he's still holding his Stetson hat, which would be impossible if the single bullet theory was true, because the bullet transited through his right radius bone and it broke the entire bone, so it would be impossible for him to hold the hat at that point. Again, notice Roy Kellerman looking directly into the rearview mirror, observing both Kennedy and Connolly being struck and doing nothing. And also notice that the Cuban, who I mentioned earlier, has his hand raised at this point, and I believe what he is doing at this point is making sure that the snipers continue finishing. This is James Algen's 255 photograph. What I want to draw your attention to is the people inside the presidential limousine. At this point, 3 shots have been fired. Notice the bullet hole is very clear in this photograph. In other words, the bullet had, I believe, it transited through the windshield at that point, striking the president in the throat. I have confirmation of this through Dr. Robert Livingston. Dr. Livingston was a physician at Parkland Hospital who treated President Kennedy the night of the assassination. The interesting thing about a throat wound to the trach is that when you have a trach injury, you have to cough. Many people thought, because the president's arms are raised as they are in this photograph, that he had a spinal injury, which was called the third-born position. This is not true. The bullet did not strike the president in the back. What he is doing is he is coughing at this point. It is not because of a spinal injury. This has confused many people. Also notice at this point that Governor Connolly, after being struck, first of all, he heard the noise, and then as he was turning to his right, he was struck at frame 224. He continues to look back towards the president and is doing so at this point. So what we are seeing at this point is the President Kennedy is again shot twice, once in the back, once in the throat. The bullet that transited through the windshield, it had slowed down at this point. Notice the spiral nebula. You can actually see the entrance hole of the bullet. The bullet struck his throat, and then the governor has been shot at this point and is turning around to get a better view at the president. What is interesting about this, if we look closer at this in this photograph, is what we are seeing here. This is Jacqueline Kennedy's hand reaching towards her husband's arm to assist him. What's key about this is if we look at the driver and the Warren Commission testimony, he said at this point that he had turned around, saw that both the governor and the president had been shot. He turned around and stepped immediately on the accelerator and took off. This is not true. from the first shot at frame Z189 and to frame Z225, 3 seconds have passed. What we are looking at, if we look closely, is this is Kellerman's ear. I'm sorry, this is William Roberts' rear ear as he's turned around. This is an envelope in his pocket. So what he is doing, he's turned directly around looking at the president. Now, in testimony before the Warren Commission, Greer said that he only turned around once. This is not true. When we examine the Zapruder film later on and other footage film, it'll be proven that William Robert Greer turned around twice, not once. So he lied. He said that he took off at this point, and yet in truth he waited a full 5 more seconds before reacting at all. Looking at the movement of Greer, to better understand William Roberts Greer's movement in the front seat, let's look at these photos. What we are seeing is at 2:55 was the time the Algin's photograph was taken. In the first frame here, this is approximately 2:70. At that point, I believe Greer has turned around, looked at the president, and is in the process of reaching into his under his right arm where his holster is located and taking out a gun. One thing for sure is he didn't want to be seen, so what he does is after he had withdrew the gun from his holster, he then turns to his front and looks over to his left. And what he does at that point is he is looking into the rear view mirror. And that's what you see at this point here. So what he is doing, he's looking into the rear view mirror, and at that point he sees Agent Clint Hill just getting off the Queen Mary coming towards the limousine. Now, these two photos, the first top photos, 2 photos, are the first turn of William Robert Greer. Now, what Greer does the second time is in the bottom 4 photos. So what he does is after he turns to the front, checks out the obvious, about frame 300, he again begins to turn to the rear. But at this time, what we're seeing in this position right here is frame 312. And what he is doing at this point is his right hand is still on the steering wheel. His left hand, he is left-handed, he's getting ready to turn and shoot the president. Now again, between frame 312 and 313, I believe that this is edited out of the film. But for now, let's just say that this happened. Now on the next frame, this is frame 313. And I believe William Robert Greer was in this position here when he fired the fatal headshot, the 313 headshot that killed President Kennedy. Now, what is interesting, from this point here is from frame 315 to frame 321, William Robert Greer does an impossible movement. What he does from frame 317 that he is located, this is the correct position, and 321 he's turned completely straight around, facing the steering wheel and looking out the front windshield and stomping on the accelerator. So what he is doing at this point, in 5 frames, he has turned 165 degrees. That is an impossibility. That proves editing in itself. Now, at this point, let's check out what Roy Kellerman is doing in the car. From frame Z133 to frame 249, Roy Kellerman is basically looking in the rearview mirror as seen in the top photo at the president and governor. Although they were hit 3 separate times, he does absolutely nothing. Then at about frame 250, he turns towards the front and he reaches down like you see in the bottom frame with his right hand and grabs the microphone. Grabbing the microphone in his right hand at frame 267, Roy Kellerman turns completely around to his left and checks out the occupants of the back of the limousine. Notice that at that point, Kellerman did not call for help. He could have, but he didn't. Now let's go down to the bottom frame. So when a 2.9 frame 295 is key and proving, and then it continues a little bit farther and it goes into Connolly's right wrist inside the presidential limit is clear. I believe this is a frame of the Mary Muchmore film. This photo print from the negative. This print was taken from frame Z25. Before doing that, what I would like to do is point out there is a button that can be seen in police photographs taken at his arrest. The only two is Kennedy is waving and with his right arm, and then in the next several frames what he'll be doing, he'll be reacting to the shot, so he'll lower his right hand towards his face and also turn forward. Let's continue. His face as